Yeah, same here. Okay. All right, the Des Moines Public Safety Emergency Management Committee is now called to order, and we've got just a couple of items on the agenda today. First item is approval of the October meeting minutes.
So moved.
So moved, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, second by Councilmember Grace Matsui. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, unanimous, awesome. Code enforcement update from our glorious chief.
Hello and thank you. Clerk, can you put the presentation in presentation mode for me? There we go. Thank you very much. So tonight we're just going to go over a little touch on code enforcement. I also sent everybody a presentation a couple weeks ago that was just like a 1 week update so you could kind of see a snapshot. This is going to be more of a holistic look for the community on what is code enforcement, what do they do. I'm going to start out with who our code enforcement officer is. You'll notice I am not he who is supposed to be giving the presentation this evening. Corey Batterman is out on hip replacement for a couple weeks here and will be back shortly, but he asked me to do this on his behalf. So a little bit about Corey. I think most people have met him. You can't not notice him. He is a giant personality in every room he walks into. He has worked for the city for 17 years as a community service officer and as a code enforcement officer. And he did want me to point out that he also qualifies as a chef, chauffeur, cheerleader, and crisis negotiator in his personal life. So, which is what raising children is among several other tasks. And you really want to talk about code enforcement. It's not just code enforcement, it's a partnership with multiple city entities. So you work with legal, you work with public works, you work with planning. It really is an enforcement piece kind of across all of those realms. So it's not specifically a police function, but rather part of a holistic view of the city. Specific to what they do. Code enforcement enforces health, safety, and community standards. A lot of what we see from them is property maintenance issues, building safety issues, and being kind of the enforcement arm of that. And really focuses on that whole idea of having a safe place to live, work, and play. A lot of that is also that perception of safety, and a lot of their work falls in that realm of helping people feel safe, feel comfortable. Some of those things that we view as disorganization or disorder directly impact people's perception of safety, and code enforcement's the tool in a lot of cases to help get that back in compliance. So things like graffiti or vandalism or not maintaining your property are things that make people feel unsafe that code enforcement helps with. A lot about this goes down to the broken window theory. Broken window theory basically says that if you allow small crimes to start, they will escalate and kind of run in a rapidly escalating fashion. So one broken window will become 10 broken windows, will become complete disorder. So if you address the single broken window when it happens, often the escalating series of events doesn't occur. So code enforcement looks at a lot of the problems like that maybe what we're dealing with seems minor. It's somebody not being compliant with a trash issue, or somebody not being compliant with a broken down car. But one broken down car will eventually become 30 broken down cars if we don't address it. So we try to address that broken windows theory view of how we're doing it. And they focus a lot on crime prevention. And a lot of times crime prevention things is the disorder, it's lighting, it's some of those really basic concepts that impact whether or not people are willing to commit a crime in an area. So if we show the community we care about an area, the response to that is people are less willing to commit a crime in the area that we demonstrate care for. This is not something I actually expect anybody to read, and frankly I haven't read because my eyes aren't that good anymore. But basically what Corey was trying to demonstrate here is that code enforcement it really touches on a million different things. There's so many different areas in the statute that he does little pieces of work in. And what he was just trying to demonstrate is how many different pieces of the statute fall under code enforcement where they do work on these different areas. And if somebody wants to expand that and read it, I certainly welcome them to. A little bit about how he does his work. And I think this is interesting in the philosophy because I think it's really a long-term philosophy instead of a short-term philosophy. Corey focuses on how do I build relationships with people. So instead of going up to somebody and saying, here's a ticket, fix it, he goes up to somebody and says, hey, are you aware there's a code? Let me explain what the code is. Are there resources you need? So he may actually help somebody with a voucher to get trash disposed of instead of going straight to enforcement. Because if we can resolve the problem, that fundamentally is our goal. And if we do it at some of those lower levels, we develop the relationships that next time it's a simple phone call maybe to get compliance if we have an issue, or they get that reputation as somebody who wants to work with their businesses and with their property owners, with their apartment managers to solve the problem. On the back end, if people after being given the information, the opportunity to fix it, refuse to fix it, he does have the ability to use enforcement. Most of the enforcement falls under civil. So it's issuing tickets or fines is typically how you force compliance. But we always try to encourage compliance before we force compliance, and Corey is very much so of that mindset. This is just a little bit of what does it look like. These are all just different issues that may come across the code enforcement's desk. A lot of this is trash, it's unkept vehicles, non-running vehicles, doing repair on vehicles. And really these are just the things that make people not want to do business in our community or not feel comfortable or safe in our community. And those are the things he focuses on. How do we make improvements? And sometimes it's even things like you have blackberry bushes growing through your fence. That's a code enforcement issue in a lot of cases, and he'll go work on those issues, and it helps with that perception of safety in our community. Some of their focus, life safety issues, obviously anything that's a direct safety issue is always going to be our first priority. Corey has been doing a lot of emphasis work on the highway. That's one of the areas that we spend a lot of time looking at graffiti, looking at trash, looking at how are we dealing with our properties, supporting building inspectors whenever possible. And then he intakes a lot of complaints. On average, he's taking about 20 new complaints a week. So he doesn't do a lot of what I would call on-view activity or self-generated activity. A huge percentage of his work is complaints come in, he addresses them, and that takes the vast majority of his time is addressing incoming complaints. A little bit about the quantity of cases. This is just looking over the last 4 years. And you'll see for a one-person show, he last year had 717 complaints on his desk. His average caseload is running just under 200, so that's what he actually has open and active at any point in time. So 20 new ones come in. He's got about 200 active ones. He solves 20 to 25, and it's a pipeline of cases coming across his desk. So it really is an astronomical workload. One of the times we really feel it is like right now, because when you have one code enforcement officer and that person's out on a medical, we feel it because we don't have other people do the work. So then it's what are we going to triage that we have to do, which is going to be your life safety issues, and what doesn't get done is some of those lower priority things, but they're super important to the community. I think that's really a key thing is we may view them as a lower priority, but those blackberries are a huge issue to the people that are calling us and saying, will you do something about them? And obviously as electeds, you know it comes to you if I don't deal with it. So sometimes we feel that right now when Corey's out. So really an amazing asset for the city. These are just some of the other things he does. Some of these are things maybe you wouldn't think about in code enforcement, but a lot of stop work orders and, dumpster vouchers. He gives vouchers to get people to the dump. Let's get the problem solved if we can work with people and find a way to do it. So just some of the different areas that he does that are a little more traditional than just a warning or a ticket. Challenges he put up here, complexity of cases. A lot of times these cases are extremely complex, especially long-term problems. When you start talking about chronic problem properties, they can take a lot of work. It can take a lot of work to find the owner. A lot of properties are bank owned or go through a whole series of ownership, and it's not always easy to figure out who's responsible for the property. So he works a lot with legal and planning to figure out who do I actually need to talk to even resolve a bank owned or a property that's in default. And a lot of times we're dealing with issues where somebody just doesn't have the money. Somebody just doesn't have the means. Somebody is suffering from mental health, and what we're seeing is the symptom of an issue, and that symptom is often a really complex problem that isn't solved with a ticket, right? And then high volume of cases will always be an issue. In the perfect world, we probably would have 5 Coreys out there. If we wanted to get proactive in how we're addressing some code enforcement, we don't have adequate resources for that, so it's a very reactive type system. And then he put up their other duties as assigned. And one of the things Corey also is he has a secondary duty as animal control officer. It's actually something that is in his job description. And what we have him doing right now is whenever a case goes out for animal control investigation, if they're going to close the case, Corey does a final review of the case and confirms that there's no investigative steps left from his perspective before he closes. So he's doing kind of that oversight of animal control, not doing the actual animal control, but he does have a component of that in his work as well.
Who is it that his work is reviewing?
Coming in from CARES. So when CARES does the criminal investigations right now and submits them, and he does a final review on those cases on our end as well.
So this would be the animal abuse type cases?
Criminal, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Criminal case. Whenever a criminal case, like a dog bite case or something is going through, if it gets to the end of the line and we're going to close the case, he does a final review to say, is there anything else I could do before we close it if it's not resulting in charges?
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, anything that's a criminal case. So where this comes from is criminal cases go to CARES. CARES does a criminal investigation. But CARES is outside the police department. They do a great job at the criminal investigations. But if they're going to close them without charges, we wanted to have that one more touch to say, is there any other investigative steps that we can think of on our end before we close it out? So really it's a partnership, but it's another duty that he was assigned this year. That might have been more directed at me than you, but sometimes other duties that are assigned are things that are priority for me to make sure that we're checking every box and doing it best practices. And I think having law enforcement have that final check box is important. And then one of the things he wanted us to point out is that while our website takes a lot of shots for not always being the greatest website in the world, and we're working to fix it, that it is a one-stop shop for filing a complaint or a grievance related to something code enforcement related. And if you do go on to the Des Moines site under reports, you can report any issue related to code enforcement right there. That goes directly to Corey's inbox, and he will be the one not only to receive it, but also to triage and respond. So it's a really quick and easy way to do it. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to wait in a phone queue. You just simple go online, push the button, and your complaint will get there. I believe you can also upload pictures on there so you can show them exactly what you're talking about. So it is a convenient place. And he has a generic email address at codeenforcement@DesMoinesWA.gov. And that is code enforcement in a nutshell.
I'm so thankful. Any questions?
Go back to this small list of 40 items. In reading this list, it looks like this spans multiple types of what you would consider industries. It could include, let's see,
Chickens.
yeah, there's the animal control part, but there's also some of like working with obstructed view of traffic. Like, could that be something that Public Works, and I'm sure he does work with them, but could they take a greater emphasis in taking over ones that are not necessarily even, they're more like a nuisance issue than it is an actual, like before it gets to this is now an obstruction and it's blocking someone's view and it becomes a liability issue, and like what other agencies within the cities can move into doing some of those that are outside of criminal and maybe in another trade, even like property line dispute. I mean, how does he have training to take on property line dispute issues?
Right. So I think it goes to a broader discussion around how he goes across multiple disciplines. And you also talk about his customers. So his customers are commercial, they're apartment complexes, they're residential, they're school districts. His other customer is within the city is other city departments. So how can he provide support for differing city departments? And I agree with you, it is often a partnership component. So the hey, can you trim the bushes? Hey, is part of often a bigger property issue. And we see some of these derelict properties where it actually is kind of an all hands on deck thing. It takes a lot of work on some of these really complex properties. So he may be doing these pieces, but he rarely is the only person doing these pieces. Often it is tied in with people outside the police department. And like in some of the derelict properties, you bring Monica in because there's a mental health or a behavioral health issue going on that's manifesting in some property issues. And you might have to bring legal in because we might have to look at how are we going to define structures and liens on a property. So it is often very holistic in how we end up responding to some of these properties. Hopefully that was clear. I kind of talked around your question, but I think I hit it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, kind of. How does the ADA issues play out for him? Because that's pretty. I mean, it's pretty clear, and enforcement is somebody sues under ADA often. So how can he prevent us from getting to that lawsuit, and what's his training to do that?
Training, I can't answer. If he was here, he would answer that. As far as ADA is typically a building code issue. And because it's a building code issue, how it's remedied is going to be a combination of multiple facets, right? Some ADA issues are resolved during remodeling and permitting for how are you going to fix a building over time. Some are resolved through compliance issue with actual fines. But typically, the more common thing with ADA is resolution through civil litigation. So that's the most common way ADA issues are resolved, is through civil litigation. Typically, that's between an aggrieved party who doesn't have access and a property owner who hasn't taken the necessary steps to give access. In that case, the city's not actually probably a party to that, is my guess, but I'm not an expert on ADA litigation.
But he wouldn't. I guess my question is, in that kind of a situation, would he be the investigating officer that determined that writes the report that triggers one way or the other, or is he just not necessarily involved at all? I don't know enough about how they come up.
Unless it's a violation of a current city code, then no. If it's a building issue or an access issue, often those are going to be resolved through civil litigation.
Thank you.
Great. Oh,
It's a
Yeah,
lawyer
I'd
question.
I'd have to speculate on what Corey was getting at with that, but yeah, if I were to speculate, I guess I would say maybe he would be getting complaints in about businesses where the ADA is not up to snuff, and he would investigate and see if they were out of compliance with city code, and then he would probably work with the businesses to try to remedy that.
Thank you.
all right. If there aren't any other questions, we can move on to the second item. All right. Take it away, Chief.
Second item, has this been emailed out, Stephanie? The schedule, or just for discussion?
I've got it here on my, I got it.
It has been
in
emailed.
my-
Okay, has been emailed.
It's in my packet, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Oh,
Turns out I have a bunch of them. So really what this is, just the work plan is the approval for the work plan is the committee. So we've come up with a rough draft of some things that we think would be important for us to cover during PSCM over the course of this year. A lot of these are kind of recurring items. Some of these are new items that I would like to report out on and have a dialogue with you all about. So today, obviously, we're talking about code enforcement. In March, we'd be talking about the upgrades to our body-worn cameras and the associated grant funding, the closure of the substation, and review of crime statistics 23 to 24, so you can get a snapshot of like kind of where crime trends are going in our community. In April, I would like to talk about our accreditation renewal process. We will be going for accreditation again at the end of the year. It is an incredibly involved process, and I think it's important that council is brought along with what that looks like and how we comply with best practices. Public Service Recognition Week. And then I'd like to have a discussion around our chaplaincy program. As our chaplains retired, and we're bringing in new chaplaincy blood, so to speak, it is an opportunity to kind of refresh the program and look at how chaplaincy can serve our entire community, not just making death notifications, but rather what is the role of chaplaincy in a healthy community. So I have some new ideas on that. We have a new chaplain coming on board who has some new ideas on that. We'd like to talk a little bit about what that could look like in our community. In May, we'll talk about summer events and my hope, staffing, and I know hope's not a plan for anybody who's going to point that out. But my hope is that by May, our staffing starts to get to the point that we can start having a discussion around what is proactive crime fighting in the form of a crime reduction team and a traffic unit, which are things I would like to start working to build out within our existing staffing. That does require that we aren't at the vacancy rate that we are at, but I think we are on a good path to get that where we can start deploying new resources to kind of proactively fight some of those crime issues that we're talking about. In June, I would like to give you an update on GPS and the co-response team. Monica, her work, as well as the associated grant that we're using to fund her. We are also looking at future grants to fund her for the next 2 years. So I'd like to give you an update on where we stand with those. We also are implementing a new CAD system, which is our dispatching software. So we are doing some work with Valleycom and with our GIS to overlay those two systems for the new CAD. Apparently we do not do PSEM in the summer, which is great for me. Darn it. Again, proposed. Every year in July, WASPIC puts out the state crime report. State crime report is after every agency in the state submits their numbers to the state in a standardized format, then the WASPIC consolidates all those numbers. The good thing about that is you can see how our crime rates stack up and how our staffing rates and a bunch of different metrics related to other police agencies across the entire state. I'll do a report out on that in September. A recap of summer events. October, we move into crime prevention and traffic safety. Hopefully by that point in time, we'll have a traffic unit. We'll be able to talk about some of the work we're doing in the traffic safety realm. In November, I think it's good for SCORE to continue to come back. I think I got a fairly positive response to having Devin come in and talk about the work Director Shrum come in and talk about the work she's doing at SCORE. I think that's good for an annual update. It's a large ticket item and certainly a liability item that I think it's important for the council to be aware of what we're doing there. And then community service officer, at some point in time, our current community service officer is looking to retire. So we'll be looking not only at what she's doing as well as what our replacement opportunities look like as far as the future of our community service officer. And in December, code enforcement would like to come in and do an annual report out on code enforcement and where we stand on code enforcement matters. So that's what I have on the proposed agenda. Again, there are components here you'll see that are a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. I like to use this time to make sure that we're educating the community on the diversity of programs throughout your police department. So I've added some of that in here. And I'm open to feedback.
Excellent. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I love the idea of the crime statistics, 23 versus 24. I'm wondering if you can do that quarterly. If you were to provide one in June, where we're at for 25 versus 24, what the trends are, what we're looking at, where we expect it to go. And then in September, when you're doing the recap and you've got the statewide statistics, it would be nice to have that. And that kind of breaks it out a little bit more quarterly. I think statistics are good to know. I think it gives the community a broader sense of really how we're doing and what, not normal, but what's to be expected given the staffing that we have. And that kind of goes to my second question because you brought up staffing. Where are we at right now in terms of vacancies, and how are we going to get that filled hopefully by the summer when at least the club FIFA stuff starts happening?
So on your first question related to crime stats, quarterly crime stats, originally that was in here, and I actually backed out quarterly crime stats because of decisions made around what we're going to do with crime analysis. Obviously, that's a body of work that we're no longer funding. And it's not that I don't have crime stats, it's that they are not going to be as robust as what you would like because there's not somebody there to analyze them. They're going to be fairly raw stats. That said, I'm certainly willing to give raw stats. It's just probably not going to be in the format that we kind of discussed last year about building out by neighborhood and doing a lot of the scrubbing of data. There's not somebody doing that once she leaves here in a couple months. So glad to do raw stats. Just want to make sure there's a little bit of an expectation setting that the body of work is something that we have chosen not to fund moving forward.
Yeah, I'm sad to hear that. I know why we're there, and it's unfortunate, but yeah, raw stats are better than no stats.
Perfect. I can do that. And I just want to be fully transparent that there will be a change to what the expectation is there, so I don't want to set you up.
And we'll probably need to be reminded at the time.
Sounds fair. Second thing is staffing. So we're authorized for 35 FTEs. Right now, 34 of them have a person in the seat.
Oh,
That's great.
Comma. 4 of those are currently on field training. So they're not in a seat by themselves. They're in a seat with somebody else. One is in military with a 12-month deployment that was just came up, and 2 of them are out on disability. So functionally, we're down 8 people. On paper, we're down 1. We are actively recruiting. We're going to the next public safety test to actively try to recruit. We've interviewed 2 or 3 people for that position that we've chosen not to bring on board. We're very obviously specific about who we bring on board. Fitting into our culture and our community is super important. So make sure we have the right person, and we will continue to try to find that right person for that 35th spot. Right now, it's looking like that's going to be entry level, and entry level means that it's about a year out before that person is in a car by themselves. So we'll be sending somebody to the academy, but there's about a year delay or lag there. The reason why I mentioned that May timeline is because the 4 people on FTO right now, if they all do well in FTO, should be coming off of FTO in May, which is the point that I think we'll be able to kind of get our head above water a little bit. We also will have one of the ones that's on disability will be coming back from disability. So we'll have theoretically 5 more deployable people come May. That said, I don't have anything wood in front of me, or I would knock really hard on it right now, because things beyond your control is part of law enforcement. Somebody blows out an ACL tomorrow, they become non-deployable, and they do great work in the back of the house doing filing cases, but you can't be out in the public if you have a disability or an injury that prevents that. So I always knock on wood a little bit with that, but hopefully we'll be in better shape as we move into the summer.
I mean, it seems to me there's some predictability that somebody's going to be out on a longer-term disability or a military deployment.
Correct.
What do you need from us to help deal with that? Because we know we're going to miss a certain number of man hours every year.
Right.
Not man hour, person hours, due to disability, deployment, predictable things. How can we help?
I'm a very positive person. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we run on a razor thin margin in law enforcement. We do. We talked about code enforcement. I have one. When he's not here, he's not here. Your law enforcement's at the same. We run on that razor thin margin where if we have all 35, we can keep our head above water. Every one of those people not here hurts. That's the reality. And as long as we have a police department that runs at that razor thin margin, it's going to be difficult. So the harder question is, what can we do? The reality is that the resources are thin in your police department. I think the resources are thin in a lot of areas across the city. I don't think I'm unique in that, but I think there is definitely a need for additional staffing to make sure that we can always meet those service levels. We certainly can look at some ideas like Hire Ahead and some things like that, but they come with funding. Hire Ahead being when you know you have somebody who's going to be leaving in a period of time, filling that vacancy, but at the end of the day, each one of those things is a financial commitment that we just aren't in a position to do right now. So I think that we can provide an excellent service with the resources we have. I think that when we have issues like this come up, particularly in bulk, I don't know how we got 8 officers down, but at some point we did. That takes a while to come back from. It looks like May is about the point that we get our head above water on that. But to your point, we will always have a predictable number of people gone. We'll always have training. The state every year adds a ton of training on law enforcement, which is good. With that said, it's all unfunded training. That means more time off the road. We'll always have a couple people injured. People will always be starting new families to get 12 weeks FMLA leave. Those things are always going to be happening, and it's just the nature of the beast in law enforcement.
Okay. Can you get us some information on how predictable the staffing could, the absence of staff can be over the course of the year? Looking back 5 years, saying
Like how many people are gone at any point in time?
yeah. And so we have some sort of target out there to say, this is the whole. Even if we're fully operational and we have somebody in every position that's funded, this is still the expected whole. Because I don't think that was part of the earlier conversation we had, the conversation earlier this year, and I know that's a real issue, and I want to, try to take a look at that and think about it long term.
I'll see what I can do to figure out a way to frame like where we should be staffed, where we're funded, what is actually deployable on a regular basis after we have leave and illness and the natural. Is that so? Kind of have what those 3 numbers look like, and is that what you're asking for? I think.
Yeah, particularly that bottom number.
Okay.
And the difference between that and what we funded. Now, we know where we'd like to be.
Okay.
At least from a state average standpoint, but, we're funded down here, and then we still have, absentee, deployment, injured, whatever, and that should be somewhat, you know, somewhat predictable, not perfectly, but how, and so maybe we can start trying to fix that piece of the pie before we really get focused on way up here, or maybe that's getting back up here is the solution. But let's at least have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'll look at what the relief factor is as far as what's actually not here versus what is budgeted.
And also, I'm assuming that this drives overtime costs, which, you know, are extensive.
Yeah, correct.
Especially already.
Yeah.
Councilmember Grace Matsui.
Yes, thank you. I would add that I think those 3 buckets of numbers that I think you described would be extremely informational, but I'd be concerned that prior number of people who are non-deployable does not predict who in the future will be non-deployable. So I think it's a good amount of information, but I don't know how helpful it might be for planning purposes, because there could be one significant incident and there could be 4 people out. There could be you hire 5 new officers and they're in their 20s and 30s and they all decide to have kids. And just because someone decided to have kids 5 years ago doesn't mean that another person's going to have kids this year. So I would just, it's good information, but I'm not sure how it can be used for forecasting. Maybe it could, maybe I'm wrong.
So I'll follow up with that. Just one of the things I think we can, I agree with everything you just said. It's the past is not necessarily the future. One of the things that we do know is that we've increased the amount of training commitments on officers. We've increased the amount of state mandated and federally mandated leave on officers. And with those things, we haven't accommodated that time with anything other than just more vacancies. So I think that we could look at some of those numbers. The other harder number to quantify is the job is more technical than it ever was before. So if you look at like a detective and what's required of a detective with the digital forensics component, the cell phone dumps that they do, the level of hours put into an investigation is night and day different. And I think those are things that are harder to quantify, but I certainly appreciate there's things like state mandated training and stuff like that we can quantify. So let me flirt with it a little bit and see if I can find a place there that makes sense with both of your questions.
Taking notes. So just a few things like asks for briefings or updates. So an animal control update, could we get one scheduled somewhere? Do you think, do you think would be a good time for an animal control update? A road cameras revenue update. I mean, we'll probably get that, you know, at the end of the year when we're planning our budget, but it might be nice to see how our cameras are doing. Then a new camera locations update, and I don't know if that's you guys, but I know that there was some research, maybe that's, you know, Public Works, but the research about possible future locations for, then just to touch base in September about possible legislative asks. If you see anything coming down the road, it'd be nice to make us aware of maybe something that you know about. Maybe you don't, but just maybe a touch base and say there isn't, is or isn't. Also, community outreach programs. So are you planning any community outreach like Coffee with a Cop, Shop with a Cop? I don't know if there's going to be anything. There's a national,
for that kind of stuff.
yeah, the National Night Out. You know, how that's, if you guys have anything like that planned. And then I think, did you talk about, you had a question about summer briefings?
Yes.
Oh, and you covered that. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We had many overlapping items to ask you about, but some of the ones that also were at top of mind is I don't believe the public safety and emergency management has had a presentation lately from the fire department. I would love to know more about call volume, response times, what types of calls they're seeing. That would be excellent. If there are NFP standards about how much staffing per capita in each city, knowing that they're a multi-jurisdictional agency, I'm wondering if we are hoping to hit some growth targets, does that mean they'll be growing with us and maybe even expanding? I don't know the answer to that, but I would love to know the answer for that. I think we had brought that up, but it was over a year ago. Yeah.
Oh, I think that would be really nice to invite South King Fire for, what's an update? How are you doing in the community? They did that once last year. They brought a kind of an extensive slide program. Didn't they do that with us last year? Yeah. Anyway, I like that. And then to touch base with, especially Councilmember Grace Matsui, about questions that, especially since she works with firefighters, questions that would be good to hear. Like, if they're gonna come, maybe they have a planned, a planned presentation, but just to know ahead of time, what would we like to know about, so that they're prepped for our interests,
Okay.
so.
Sounds good.
Anything else?
No, that encompassed the same, we had many overlapping items, so that was
Okay.
it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then South King, do you have a timeline for where you'd like to see them added on here? Is there
Probably what
anywhere I
works for
can,
you.
wherever I can get them in? Okay.
Yeah, what in this scheduling here, and them, just as long as we get information, I think it's more you guys than us, so.
I'll reach out and get them scheduled. Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, anything else?
That's all I
All
got.
right, good job, thank you.
Thank you very
Adjourn,
much.
oh,
Move to
a
adjourn.
motion, move to
I'll
adjourn.
second.
All right, all in favor? Yay, thank you.